Well, I'm here today with Robert Kelsey, who is the best-selling author of a series of self-help books. He's a former banker, magazine editor and journalist, and in 2002 he set up his own PR agency, serving some of the world's most prestigious financial institutions by helping them convert their expertise into fantastic content. He also taught scores of young trainees how to write compelling copy before selling his agency in 2019 to Fin Partners, where he remains a consultant. In 2013, he launched the think tank, the Centre of Entrepreneurs, with serial entrepreneur Luke Johnson, who is also his partner in his latest venture, John Wilkes Publishing. And his latest book, published by John Wilkes Publishing, is Writing Well for Work and Pleasure, the New Writer's Guide to Producing Fearless Content. It's great CV, Robert. Tell us a little bit about how it all hangs together.
Well, yes, I'd say some wouldn't say it was a great CV. Some would say it was a bit of a disaster of a CV.
It's an eclectic, it's multi-hyphenate, isn't it? That's the
yes. But it all does join. In my mind, it all joins up as a sort of a narrative of just me getting to where I want to be, really. And I mean, I left school. And I think this will probably come up again, actually, when it comes to the writing side of things. I left school. I was 15 when I left school. I had one O level. I went to a very, what was very much seen as a failing comprehensive later on, and so felt very bereft of both education and opportunities. And so I've really spent my entire adulthood trying to overcome what I saw as a gap in me. And I think one of the upside of that is that now, I'm in my mid-50s, I realized that what that engendered in me was this notion of self-improvement, of adult education, of constantly being of constant education. It never ends, it never stops, and so there was always this sort of teleogenic process with me where I was always heading towards goals. And actually, what I found frustrating was actually almost achieving those goals, and that would leave a sort of empty feeling, if you like, and feeling that the next thing had to be there. Unless there was frustration or a sense of frustration, I felt I was bored. And so in some respects, that's why it zigzags a bit. But for me, it's actually a process of learning, of skill acquisition, and of just that sort of constant frustration and feeling that there's something more, something better, something just more fulfilling out there, really.
It's really fascinating, isn't it? And leaving school, as you say, then lean and hungry. It's amazing how that shapes the direction of your life, because there's a sort of an emotional thing underneath it all.
Yeah,
really.
I think. I mean, the moment for me was. I mean, I guess I didn't quite realize just what educational poverty I was in, and it was only when I actually ended up working at a West End, a very posh West End surveying firm in the sort of early 1980s, and everyone that else was there had been privately educated, and I turned up, and the reason they employed me was because one of their biggest clients was North Thames Gas, and those days the gas department had a huge number of houses where all the gas fitters worked, and they employed me because they thought I could talk to the gas fitters. And so everyone else was dealing with like the Duke of Westminster, etc., and I was dealing with the gas fitters. And but of course, what I realised, they sort of took me on as a bit of a sort of always sweet, this little Essex boy, as sort of a bit of a mascot for them. And then they slowly said to me, you know what, you're just as brainy as us. You're just as there's nothing. You've just been shortchanged in your education, and I think it was them. I owe them enormous debt, actually. This sort of little gang of public school boys that basically said, "You're as good as us, and you need to get. You've been shortchanged," and that sort of stuck with me the rest of my life, really.
So, and then where you take it after that is up to you, isn't it?
Indeed, it is. But nonetheless, and again, one of the things the Centre of Entrepreneurs taught me, and again, I think this is very relevant for your business audience, and the reason I got involved in the Centre of Entrepreneurs is that, and actually the reason I became an entrepreneur ultimately is that if you look at entrepreneurship, the excluded groups, are the people that end up setting up companies. If you
Yeah.
enormous number of immigrants, awful lot of women. There's people that are hitting glass ceilings. That people are often working class people that don't have the educational background. Enormous number of them are become entrepreneurs. Because they've got no choice. But
And
and I
neurodiverse, I think it's a lot as well.
say that again.
And neurodiverse people as well, who
Yes, oh
just
no,
don't.
absolutely. Oh,
Yeah.
enormous number of dyslexic people, or a huge number. It's people that can't cope with just that normal process. And I'm not saying it's not necessarily a class thing, although it sort of goes across all sorts of barriers. It is as well, but it's not entirely, and it's not entirely a gender thing or an ethnic thing or anything. It is actually just people that just aren't quite suited to that the corporate ladder, if you like. And obviously things are changing in the corporate world in that respect, but certainly my generation, you very much see that sort of exclusion. Not quite, it's not clubbable. I didn't even know what that expression meant, but do you see what I mean? He doesn't quite fit in. He's the, and
Yeah.
there's all sorts of
We're a
reasons why
motley
you
crew.
won't. Yeah,
I love
exactly.
that. Writing often is a casualty, isn't it, of, as you say, educational poverty? Because, and this is, I want to come on to that idea about fearless content, because
Yeah,
often one of the reasons that people don't write is that they aren't confident
yeah,
about the grammar, about the spelling, about the things that should have been instilled, or they should feel they have a grasp on when they leave school. I was an adult basic education tutor for a while. Worked with some incredibly bright entrepreneurs who faked being able to read and got
yeah.
around being able to write and stuff. So, what would you say to people who are afraid of writing, frankly, because it doesn't feel like it's in their skill set?
Well, I think that's exactly what the book's all about. Is overcoming that fear. Hence, why the word "fearless" is in the subtitle. How to produce fearless content. Because I know from experience that the biggest thing that's preventing you is that fear. Now, the book opens with a quote from Christopher Hitchens, who's God rest his soul, and actually he's someone I adore. Actually, I think his take on the world is brilliant. Actually, but he basically said everyone has that book in him, but for most people, that's where it should stay. And I really objected to that because I think that he wasn't the only person to say that, but I really object to that because I think that was someone with a private education, with Oxbridge, etc. And that there was something very snobby in that statement. And so my book is really an attack on that. From page one to the last page, it's really just saying that's not true. Everyone does have that book in them, absolutely, and it's absolutely possible to produce it yourself. You don't need a ghostwriter, etc. You can do it yourself, and it's not just books, it's white papers, it's articles, it's blogs, what is extraordinary, I think, is that with, with, the world's become very visual, but it's all. But there's a lot of digital communication out there, like podcasts now, videos, etc. But what is another element that's also occurred is that writing has also exploded as well, and it's particularly exploded in the workplace. The number of marketing departments or PR departments that are putting pressure on their executives to produce content, to produce blogs on LinkedIn or to produce white papers, etc. What they realize is the world, if we move to the knowledge economy, what are we selling? Well, we're selling knowledge, we're selling expertise. And so that expertise needs to get out there. And I'm sorry, but a podcast gets you so far, or a video gets you so far, but actually you need something to thump on the table and says, we've done the thinking here. You know what I mean? There's something behind us, this podcast. There's something behind it that says we've done the thinking, we've done the research, and that is the written word, and there's no substitute for it. And therefore PR departments, marketing departments, putting a lot of pressure on people who may be salespeople, they may be engineers, etc. And they're just suddenly thinking, God, this is just not my skill. I hated English language classes at school. You know what I mean? I was the maths guy, or the rugby player, or whatever. And so I hated it. And now suddenly this skill is required, and you can see why they would be absolutely scared by it. I don't blame them for everything you say about what's Christopher Hitchens mean by that? What he means by saying that's where it should stay is that it is within them. Is by saying that these people don't have the skills to put their thinking and their thoughts on the page. And those. Sorry, but there's nothing innate about those skills. It's a craft. There's no talent here. This is a craft. It's no different to knitting or what I mean, or painting by numbers or whatever. It's simply a craft, and you just have to learn the craft. That's all you have to do. And it might take practice, and it might take, learning a few rules now, fine, but they're not that, they're not that scary. They sound scary, but they're not that scary. And actually, you know what? It's the last thing that matters. Like I said, there's a process. And what the bit that's scaring you is what I call style. And that process, and the process, which I call angle, content, structure, style, which is those. I always say, people have said make it a mnemonic or whatever, but I said I don't want to make it a mnemonic. It's because I want you to remember those 4 words: angle, content, structure, style, and you do it in that order. So therefore, style comes right at the end. You've worked out the angle, you've worked out what you're going to say, you've researched and collated, brought all together the content that you're going to do. You've then structured that content, worked out what's in, what's out, what order it comes in, what order within the bits it comes in, structure, and then and only then does style matter. You've already probably from the structuring produced a first draft it's a dirty first draft. It can be terrible. It can be absolutely appallingly written. It doesn't matter. It's a first draft. The last bit is style. That's all you have to worry about, by which time you've got 50,000 words. It's all there. It's well structured. It's a good angle. And you've just got this last hurdle. And that will get you over the fear that, and I think that's what happens is people approach these projects and they're facing this cliff edge. And the cliff edge is style and grammar and, and that's where the fear kicks in. And that's where, God rest his soul. But, Christopher Hitchens, I think, is utterly wrong because, that he's thinking it's all about style. And I'm sorry, but it's not. It's the last thing.
Right, I pick up on loads of things there. So much I'm picking up in your wake there. One of the things is about fear, and just it's an observation, which I think that there's various flavours of fear, because yes, so much fear is around, I can't do this. There's also the fear around how vulnerable you are when you write and people can judge your work. So there's something there which we might come back to.
I think that's absolutely true. Yeah.
Yeah. Another thing that I just thought was really great about your approach actually is that you start with angle. And I think an awful lot of people jump into content straight away.
Yeah.
And just taking that step back, because angle forces you to think like a journalist, doesn't it? It's like, how am I going to grab people? What's in it for them? Who is it for? What do they care about? And I think even just that step before you launch in is a really important one.
I think that's right. On that, I just think with fiction, I think it's very different to fiction in that respect. I remember reading a book about writing fiction, and it basically said you can just start at the beginning and see where it goes. You don't need the plot fully outlined before you start. It can be just a moment standing on the beach with a friend or something. And non-fiction is the absolute opposite of that.
I think performative non-fiction is, and that's why I wanted to come on to. So performative non-fiction, where you're writing for other people and you've got to communicate or influence or persuade or inform. But you also talked, I thought this was fascinating, about your diary, that you always keep a diary. And I'm guessing that you don't use the angle there. You just actually start writing and use the writing to process experience. So just what's your reflection on those different types where you've got content that is really consciously crafted for an audience, and then the writing that you just sort of do in a more exploratory way?
Yeah, well, I think because one of the key concerns, you've got 3 bits of process problem. One is starting, two is keeping going, and three is avoid writer's block, as they say, which is a real thing and does happen. There's no doubt about it. And actually, this is all about overcoming one of those and one of those barriers. And so things like the diary or just having notes. I even have the sort of 6 by 4 white cards and even a post-it note. Anything like that it can be useful in terms of thoughts when they come, jotting them down, getting it in the structure. My favorite would be a big A4 book like this, where you can then go, okay, this is chapter 1, these are the notes underneath, this is chapter 2, these are the notes underneath, and they're just bullet points. They're very rough. They're just things that need to be there. You then start thinking about what order they should be in, and before you know it, a structure is starting to emerge. The diary is important, I think, for things like writer's block, because what you're trying to do there is you're trying to change the perspective. There may well be elements where you really can't get it over, and the reason you can't get it over or get it down, sorry, the reason you can't do it is because you're obsessed by your audience, and you're concerned that that having to write for this audience, you need to get it particularly in the right way. You need to formulate the right arguments, and so I'm saying, and you're having difficulty. So I'm saying, forget that. Change the audience. And so it could be you could write a letter to your mum, or you could or an email to your mum these days, and or you could just write it in a diary, going, God, what a terrible morning I'm having. I just can't get this round. I'm trying to get this across and this across and this across, and actually you're suddenly getting it across. And the only reason you're doing that is because you've changed the audience.
And you've taken the pressure off yourself.
You've simply taken the pressure off yourself, and maybe you're asking questions about it rather than trying to provide answers, and whatever, and I think that the order of it, I think, should be, first of all, it should be you and you doing it to yourself. Then it should probably be you, maybe to your spouse or to your partner or to your mum, and then third, perhaps to a colleague. And the reason I'm saying it in that order is about jeopardy. Because you said you're vulnerable as a writer. You are absolutely vulnerable as a writer. One of the things I notice is, I've written 6 books now and published them all and had different responses from different people. And one thing I've noticed is that there are people that would never, ever think of ever writing a book. And, they're some of the most critical. They will because they won't put themselves out there. Do you see what I mean? So they will, so they're very happy to criticize the book, and you do feel like saying, I've had it before. I remember doing some talks on one of the books and got a really furious criticism from somebody, from a particular person that was in Northern Ireland, and I just came away, and I sort of got very defensive about of just defending a point, and I just felt like saying in the end, why don't you spend a year researching a book and in 6 months writing it and in 6 months editing it, and then go through all the process of trying to market it. Why don't you come up and do that, and then maybe I'll come and criticize you? And and of course,
like Brene Brown, isn't it? Brene Brown talks about being in the arena and not listening to the people in the seats. I'm only interested in your opinion if you're in the arena.
No, absolutely. And I mean, I'm interested in everyone's opinions. Obviously, that's part of my audience, and I'll take the criticism. But actually, they, the fact that they were so sneering as when I tried to defend a particular point of view, I can't even remember what the argument was about now. But but obviously, and so. So you are vulnerable, absolutely, and this is just different ways of overcoming that vulnerability of doing it anyway. There was Susan Jeffers' book, feel the fear and do it anyway.
Do it anyway.
And it's actually the best thing about that book is the title. Actually,
it's iconic title, isn't it?
Yeah.
And you're not just content to write the books, though, are you? Because this time you're also publishing them. So tell us a little bit about John Wilkes.
Well, yes, I just felt. I've had various publishers over the years with the books, and I felt that I could do a better job. Actually, I don't think they, my last publisher, John Wiley, I don't think they did a bad job. I think they were great, but the imprint they were using, Capstone, seems to have. I wouldn't say it's gone, but it seems to they're not pushing it the way they did push it. And so I felt that, well, if I wanted to write another book, why not try self-publishing And so I started looking at that route, and then I started thinking, no, hang on a minute. There's actually a real opportunity. One, self-publishing doesn't produce the quality of book that you really want, that you get off the shelf, etc. Because the print quality is just not there. It's always digital printing, etc. So I wanted to explore it, and then I felt, actually, no, hang on. There's more to this, because I think there's a lot of books that could be written that aren't being written at the moment, because I think a lot of the publishers are scared of a lot of subjects, and I also think that there's I think the publishers often don't get behind the books the way I would like to see them do so. Maybe because they're too large. They've got it's a volume game, so they've got a lot going. They've got a lot going on, and you're just one more writer, and you're hardly Stephen King, so they're not going to necessarily invest in you. So and I felt that there was a way of doing it, of looking at getting some really strong ideas going that maybe that the publishers wouldn't be interested at the moment. Getting behind the books on the PR front, because obviously I understood PR, having spent a long time producing a PR firm and getting to the point of selling it, and then using the mechanics in the middle to learn about the process of publishing a book, and also to outsource where we could. We've got a very good distributor now. We've got a fantastic PR person on board, and
Ruth,
Ruth, that's exactly right. And it's the best as far as I'm concerned. I remember her from my days as books for John Wiley. So so as far as I'm concerned, we're just creating the mechanics, and we're going to try. And it's just typical of me, really, just to think, it's not just about producing a book. Let's do something more with it. Let's see what we can do. We've got a couple of books coming up. Not ones I'm willing to talk about at the moment, but we've got the slush pile, as they call it, starting to build, and it's very exciting. It's nice to learn a new industry. There's nothing, in the end, the barriers to entry aren't as great as you think they are. One thing I am learning, actually, is that I always was frustrated by why it took them a year to turn around a book whenever you went to the publishers, and I'm now learning
now
why.
You know why.
So I'm a bit more.
It's not the production time.
Yeah,
it's the supply chain. Yeah, absolutely.
It's the supply chain. That's exactly
and
right.
the marketing cycles.
Yeah, it's exactly that. I mean, so I'm learning, in some respects, becoming a bit more sympathetic now, and and I've bought a tweed jacket, and I'm, having the time.
You're halfway there. That's brilliant. Love it. It's really exciting, actually. Books which were predicted to die, several times over the last couple of decades, are just having such a renaissance. I think people are really turning to them more and more, and the number of young people really, discovering books for themselves, book talk, and it is just really makes your heart glad as a publisher, because it has looked as though we were on the wrong side of history for a while.
I think that's absolutely right. I mean, I'd say to people, if you go back to 2000 and you put a DVD, a CD, and a book on the table, and then say one of these is going to survive and prosper into the 2020s, which one is it? And it was the one that was in the 1920s and the 1820s. So and I think that's absolutely brilliant, actually. And it's a great format. There is no, here's my book. This is a brilliant.
It's a great technology.
Way of communicating information. You just couldn't make it up. It was already a perfectly nice tiny little format. It worked. Putting it in your pocket, it absolutely works. You can. So I'm delighted with it, really. And I think that Kindle and audiobooks are all part of that mix. I think they can help, and they're great, and they expand it. I've always thought, every time I've had an audiobook I've really liked, I've immediately gone out and bought the book, just because I've wanted to reread it or pass it on, or have it on the shelf. And so
it's just a joy that there are different formats for different situations, and the same person will. I think they said, I saw a survey recently that says something like 65% of Americans go absolutely kind of seamlessly between the three contents of readers, which I thought was great. Yeah,
that's very good. Yeah.
I'm keeping an eye on the time, because I'm very conscious that we're pushing at the edges, and I want to get your tip out of you, because I know it's going to be really, really good. So if I held a gun to your head and said, out of all the things in the book, one best tip for a first-time business book author, what would you say?
Process. It's focusing on the process. It's not looking at it as 50,000 words that have got to be written, and they've got to be written well and perfectly, and etc. etc. It's working on that process. Spend an awful lot of time thinking about the angle, and what we mean by that. But what's the point you're trying to make? You're not just trying to relay information. You're relaying a point of view, and what is that point of view? Does it stack up? Etc. And then think about the content next. So do it in that order. What's the angle? What content supports that angle? That content process is your research process. It should just be gathering information, and then you've got to sift it and work out what's in and what's out. Obviously, that might change your angle. That might question your angle, and I think you should be open to that process. It might well be. There's no point producing something that could be easily refuted. So if there's something that actually does undermine your angle, you need to take that seriously. Then you just need to structure it, work out what order it comes in, and then and only then do you need to focus on the writing. And that would be my tip: is to just look at it that way. Angle, content, structure, style, and I always make people remember that. When all the people that come through our office, the youngsters, particularly the graduates, and they've never really been taught to write and think in that way, and I it's the first thing I teach them, and they love it. We actually had one of my guys just absolutely didn't work out, hated my guts, and it really didn't like me. And as he left, he just turned around to me and said, "You know what? The only thing I wish is that I knew how to write this well when I was at Oxford." And I said to him, "Another happy customer." So as far as
it's a great portmanteau tip. So well done, squeezing a huge amount into your tip there. Love it.
Yeah, sorry about that. Yeah,
no, don't apologise. It's brilliant.
Yeah.
And the book that you would recommend. Let's have a fearless book recommendation from you. Not your own, obviously. Sorry, you can't do that.
No, obviously. But I think that probably the book that had the most influence on me, which I read late, but I realised there was a lot in there, and I quote it constantly and people start rolling their eyes when I bring it up again, which is Stephen Covey, 7 Habits, and I just think it's the best self-help book ever written. I think it's completely unbeatable in that respect. I think there's things about it sorts you out mentally, things about like the circle of influence and the circle of concern and things like that. It just absolutely blows you away in that respect. I think it's incredibly written. So I can't help it. I think that every time I come back to that book,
no, I'm with you all the way. You're not the first to recommend it. You won't be the last. For anybody who's been living under a stone, it's Stephen F. Covey's 7 Habits of Highly Effective People, and it just stands the test of time, doesn't it? And it's so foundational to so much of the work that's come later. Yeah, brilliant.
And there's plenty in here of that, really. That's because he's on about process as well, and about those 7 habits build. And there's plenty in here that has been influenced by that.
Yes, I was thinking that was really good stuff about habits as well, and that sort of protecting your time and stuff. Yeah, brilliant. Wonderful. It's been such joy talking to you, and it's so rich that I think people need to go back and listen to it 3 more times, making notes all the way. But if people want to find out more about you, Robert, and more about the book and more about the books to come in the future, where should they go?
Well, Amazon, I've got obviously there's if you put me into Amazon, all my books come up. This one hopefully comes up top these days, and there's obviously some profile on me on the Amazon site. John Wilkes is still early days, but we do have a website, johnwilkes.co.uk, and you can actually buy the book from John Wilkes as well as on Amazon, etc. So I guess those are the two. Otherwise, I mean, there was a Robert Kelsey website, but I'm much more interested in the sort of companies I create and that sort of thing than I am in just pushing my own name, really. So so johnwilkes.co.uk is probably the best place to find out about us. And then the Amazon page gives you about my author journey and the various books I've written over the years.
Brilliant. Well, I'll put those links up on the show notes at extraordinarybusinessbooks.com as usual. And thank you so much for your time, Robert. I've just enjoyed talking to you so much. And we didn't have nearly long enough to more than scratch the surface, but thank you. And I thoroughly enjoyed the book as well. Thank you.
Great. Oh, well, I'm glad you did. Thank you very much. Thanks, Alice.